This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes or Apple Podcast, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, this is going to be a fun show. We have a gentleman here who is I would guess you would say, a do-it-yourself landlord. He knows what it means to have rental properties and work with rental properties to try to get that maximum cash flow that we're all about here on this show. So I'm talking about Lawrence Jankalo. And prior to launching his company, Avail, okay, we're going to talk more about that company, Lawrence spent 7 years in data and analytics, first as a consultant at Protiviti, Chicago, and then at Goldman Sachs. Originally from South Africa, Lawrence has a hard-working spirit, and together with his co-founder, Ryan Kuhn, they've developed the idea for their company on a napkin, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, right? And a lot of us real estate investors do a lot of napkin analyses, so I can relate to that. And that now solves the needs of thousands of landlords. Lawrence is also a longtime real estate investor with a passion for 3-unit multifamily properties. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that can relate to that too. So Lawrence, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
Well, it's great having you on. It sounds like you've got a really interesting background. You've got the tech side. Definitely looks like you've got the financial stuff going. Goldman Sachs, and also just as an investor, and an entrepreneur. I'm sure you have a lot of great experience to share with us. But before we jump into all that stuff and what your company does, I'd like to just hear your story. I mean, you're from South Africa. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. So maybe you can give us, just kind of a roundout of who Lawrence Jankalo is.
Sure. Well, not a lot about the South Africa necessarily. My family immigrated here when I was about 10 years old, and so a lot of my memories of South Africa have kind of faded over the years. And worst of all, my accent has definitely left me as well. So that's a shame. But no, we came here to the United States looking kind of to, at least from my parents' perspective, solve for that American dream. Just come here where the opportunities were great. My dad restarted his career over here. He was in finance as well. And then as I grew up, went through the American college system, learned a great deal. I was a finance major. When I graduated college, I went on to do business and risk consulting for just over 4 years. That included a lot of data analysis, where we would just go and help clients better understand their systems and their processes through data. Left there, joined Goldman Sachs, where it was much of the same, but just for Goldman, a lot of data analysis around their portfolios that they had and those kinds of things. And that's actually when I did my first real estate investment, bought my first 3-unit multifamily from a friend who was at Goldman, and he was moving out of the state, and he was looking to sell. And so bought it off market, which was a huge windfall, I think, there, and got me started. After I was doing that for a while, trying to manage it myself, kind of went down that path saying, hey, look, I don't want to use a property manager, but they have access to these great tools. And I'm kind of struggling here, recording everything in Excel and receiving paper checks. So, as you mentioned in the intro, my buddy Ryan and I decided, hey, let's go and start our own business. So we quit our jobs. I left Goldman, and we started our own platform for do-it-yourself landlords that essentially helps them with the same sort of tools that a professional would have, but as a do-it-yourselfer, you just wouldn't have otherwise had access to.
That's great. Now, is Ryan the techie in the and I'm trying to see who's got the sort of the programming background, all that stuff.
Yeah. Painful memories already coming out of that. So no, neither of us were the tech entrepreneur.
Wow.
And actually in the Midwest here in Chicago, it's actually really hard to find a tech founder too. So in 2012, when we decided to quit our jobs, we basically hunkered down and taught ourselves to code. And so we spent that first 6 months to a year learning at that time, which was like the main tech thing, which was Ruby on Rails. So we taught it ourselves, and we actually built the entire application ourselves from the ground up.
Awesome. Well, that's neat. Well, this is really interesting because I love when you have entrepreneurs that create ideas out of need. And so you got this 3-unit. You probably didn't know what you were getting yourself into when you first bought it, but you start, jumping in as, okay, I can do this, and my buddy did it, and so forth. And as you started to get into this, now where were you seeing some of the challenges? Now, were you working full time? You were at Goldman while you had this property, so you had a full-time job, which I'm sure, I know how Goldman works people. It's like 14-hour days and that kind of stuff, and you've still got this property to manage. Where were you finding these pain points, so to speak, that really sort of motivated you to want to do something?
Yeah, well, the first pain point was just not knowing what I'm supposed to do. You get this property, and luckily it had tenants in it to begin with. So, it delayed some of the pain around finding tenants and screening them. That got kicked down the road for a couple months until I got my feet wet a little bit. But the very first thing was I didn't have a list of contractors. I didn't know what my legal obligations were. So when something broke in the unit, like you're making all the mistakes where you're fine. I'm just going to go knock on the door. I don't give any notice. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. That was the big first pain. And then, 6 months went by and I had to find my first tenant. And I had nowhere, I didn't know where to go to find out if it was a good tenant. Or get a credit score. I didn't know even that I needed a credit score. And so at that time, I started then doing the research and thinking, okay, well, how are you supposed to be a landlord? It's really just a lot of learning from day one. But you can do it if you go onto Google and you just start looking up articles. It's there for you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are great resources online for sure, but it's really, you can educate yourself as much as you want, prior to buying that property. But I feel the real education starts right after you sign your first set of escrow papers, because really, you're reading a lot of people's ideas and theories and approaches, but until you're in it, you don't really know what the issues are. And, so you're kind of dealing with this now. You started investing in other properties. Was that right away, or was that later down the road?
So I had gotten the first 3 flat, and then I waited about 2.5 years to get the second one. And the second one was I was walking to work one day and saw 3 flat on my way. It was for sale. It looked good. I got to work. I looked up online. The numbers made sense. They were actually really cheap. Apparently, it had just gone up for sale that day, and I think the prior owner had lived in one of the units for 40 plus years. And so she had put it on. Yeah, she had put it on the market. I think she way underpriced it just because she'd been there so long. I think she was looking to retire and needed cash pretty quickly. And then we didn't use an agent, so we were able to get a better deal. And so picked up that one just because the numbers made a lot of sense and happened to see it.
Now, where was that located? Were you in Chicago at the same time, or no?
Yeah, in Chicago, just down the street from my house. So I'm close to Wrigley Field where I live, and this was just a couple blocks away.
Okay, so I mean, you're basically in the city. So, wow, that's you would think that'd be like skyrocket in price. It seemed like it'd be a really hot area to buy in.
Yeah, and it definitely is a hot area, but the rents then make up for it as well. So the purchase price is high, but the rents are also high here.
Going back to sort of the company itself, when you and Ryan kind of sat down and took out the napkins and started writing down ideas, what were some of those issues that you wanted to create in terms of a platform or a software that would be able to address those issues? What were sort of the top, your top 10 or your top list here of things that you needed to deal with?
Sure. Well, we started thinking down this path where we had just spent all this time learning everything as we were going. And we said, okay, well, the first thing that a landlord's going to need is to know what they're supposed to do. But that quickly changed because we realized telling someone that you need to get a credit score on a tenant when you're screening them doesn't actually help them go and get the credit score. So we quickly changed and said, okay, we're going to explain why you need a credit score, what it means, but we're also going to then give you the tool and access to go and get it. So some of the initial pain points for us were, if you have a vacancy coming up, how do you go about finding tenants? So do you want to put your listing on Craigslist, or what do you want to do with it? And so we said, you know what, Craigslist isn't the best place anymore. We thought there were a bunch of other really great places, and the pain was that you don't want to have to create 10 listings. So we said, okay, let's first solve this problem where you can create one listing with us, and then we'll automatically push it out to all of the other websites across the web, just to try to save time. Because what I was doing was going to Zillow, creating a listing. At that time, I think Hotpads and Trulia weren't part of Zillow. So you'd go to those websites and you'd create a listing there too. And you'd go to PadMapper, or you'd go to Lovely. You'd go to these 10 websites to create a listing. And then all of the leads that you get are going to all of these different websites. And so it's really painful to try and manage all of the tenant applications that are coming in. So we said, let's solve for that. Let's make one area where we can just bridge all of the communication together and syndicate those listings out. And then we went on to the tenant screening, because once we were getting people 20 plus leads, we were getting complaints that it was too many leads and they didn't know what to do with them. And so the next obvious thing for us was, let's get a rental application. Let's help them screen those tenants, find out where they lived in the past, who their employer is, allow them to upload a W-2 or a pay stub, let them authorize the credit score and criminal background check, eviction check, and kind of proceed through that way. And so those were the initial 2 pain points. We later on added digital lease signing. So one of the biggest problems that we saw as a landlord was how many things there were that you have to be in compliance with in a lease agreement. And so we said, okay, we're going to put in the legwork and make state-specific leases for each state. And then for the top 100 cities, we made specific ones. And so any landlord would just go in, grab this template that was state and city compliant, and then they'd be able to use that and their tenants would sign it online. And so we tried to do all of the operational stuff to get a landlord to find a tenant, screen them, and then lease to them. And then the last thing we added was rent collection. So you've gone the distance here, you've got the tenant signing the lease. The last step now is to collect first month's rent and security deposit. In a paper world, you would usually do that at the same time as signing the lease. So we felt we were obligated to go and figure out, how do we do rent payments so that the landlord could collect those things at the same time as signing a lease. And so we added a rent payment or rent collection feature that allows tenants to log in every month or set up auto pay and schedule their rent. And these are the core features. If I had to bundle them into one category, I'd say all of the operational features of running your business as a landlord.
Very cool. I'm going to take a little step backward here, because as you started as a landlord and really as an investor, period, what would you say, sort of your biggest mistake, or maybe there's key mistakes that started triggering that you needed some help?
As the business owner or as the real estate investor?
As the real estate investor.
Sure. So, real estate investor, I think I think a mistake that I avoided was making sure to bring in a partner. So in this case, when I found those 2 properties, I actually asked my dad if he wanted to go in with me on those, and he said yes. And that's been helpful not just because like you diversified a little bit and you have more people so you can get more properties, but because when something breaks, if I can't fit it into my schedule, then oftentimes he can fit it into his schedule. Or even just being like, hey, I don't know what to do here. Do you know what to do? Just having someone to talk to. So I find investing in groups to be a huge win. So I'd say that's a big success for my real estate investing. I'd say the mistake was not factoring in deferred maintenance when we bought some of these places. So the first one was from a friend and at Goldman. And I think, he's a great stand-up guy, but I think he had a lot of deferred maintenance that he just never wanted to get to that I inherited. And that ended up costing us quite a bit of money to bring the property up to what we thought was a nice habitable environment for our tenants.
Yeah, that's one I think that across the board, most real estate investors just do not account for or allow for, especially when you're buying older buildings. It's just built in. So, and the lady that I'm sure that the 40-year plus that had lived there, I mean, you probably had your share of deferred maintenance there, unless she was really good at taking care of that.
Yeah, and both buildings were built in the late 1800s, like 1880 or 1890.
Wow.
So they're really old buildings. Yeah, some of them, and Chicago for general, some of them got rehabbed over the years. These ones were pretty old. They still had like a lot of plumbing problems, a lot of electrical problems. So windows that were probably 40 years old, like we ended up having to replace a lot in the buildings.
Wow. Well, on the success side, again, as an investor here, and you can also share too in the business side too. But what would you say your sort of your biggest success where you saw, hey, we're doing things right here?
Yeah, well, I think the big success on real estate investing comes on the purchase. To be honest, you have to purchase something where the numbers make sense. Here in Chicago, that can be really tough. I don't know if this is a term that you guys are familiar with or your listeners are, but we look at the gross rent multiplier here a lot.
Yes, we do too.
Which in Chicago, like an average could be 12, which is really high. And so we look at the numbers that to us is kind of a quick yes or no. And then we use that just to screen if we're looking at properties. And then obviously you dig down further. We try to forecast out what those operating expenses are, and so that we can focus on what's going to be cash flow positive. Our investing methodology is we want cash right away. We're not looking to have the bulk of the wealth created through appreciation of the property. We're looking for cash, and so we look at the cash flow and we look at the cash on cash return, and we won't purchase something if it doesn't have, at least for us, like a 8% cash on cash return. And I think that's where the big success comes in, is if you can be diligent and not have it be an emotional investment.
Got it. Great information. You mentioned a little bit there in terms of contractors, getting people to do things if things break and so forth. Is that included in this platform that you have?
Yeah, I'd say it's the one feature that's probably weak on our platform. So our tenants now across our platform will submit maintenance requests through their portal, and that will be routed to the landlord, and it will surface some options through Yelp for contractors. But other than that, it doesn't do much else. Now we have in our roadmap to do a lot more, and we constantly interview our landlords and our tenants to find out what they would want. And what we're hearing from people is they really want something that when a tenant submits a ticket, it goes out to a network of contractors who can in real time bid on the ticket and maybe come back with 3 or 4 bids, and the landlord can just approve one of them, and then work with the tenant then the contractor would work with the tenant to go and fulfill the maintenance ticket. And I think that's probably going to be where our maintenance portal heads over the next 12 months. Something that's just more real-time bidding. The landlord knows that they're getting the best price. And then obviously you'd build in reviews for that so that the landlord can trust that the quality of the work is going to be good. And so there's a huge future there, but right now it's pretty weak on our platform.
Yeah, that's one of those areas I think somebody would really do well in terms of a business that is just geared towards real estate investors. I tap into, I do both. I mean, I have property management for all of my properties because I'm an out-of-state investor. But at the same time, there's times when, I know if I'm going to call the property manager to do something, it's going to be 4 times as much, as, getting a local handyman to come in and do it. So, I found, I don't know if you're familiar with TaskRabbit. It's one of those services that you can get on and they'll send somebody the same day within an hour or whatever. It's really great, but you don't always know how good the guy is, or sometimes they choose not to take the job even after they've said they're going to do it. So there's a lot of built-in errors there, but I think in terms of the issues, the common things with us, it's plumbing, is probably one of the major ones. You get people that flush too much stuff down the toilet, or they've got other plumbing issues, leaky faucets or whatever, and then you've got just sort of the ongoing issues that happen at apartments. This breaks or that breaks, but I think that there's also that turnaround expense too, which is huge, and landlords have to confront with sometimes replacing carpet, painting the walls, and a turnaround can be just cut totally into your profits. And to be able to find a company that would do all of that, where you'd get the best prices for those kinds of things, would be invaluable, I think, for a real estate. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but that is always one of those areas of frustration, is if you're not there. Do you find majority of your clients use outside service people, or do they prefer to do a lot of the fixes themselves?
Yeah, no, most of them are probably going to use outside service people. Like for us, most of our clients are going to be full-time, employees somewhere. So, in some industry, and they're really just part-time landlords. So they probably don't have the technical expertise to do plumbing or electric. They may go and, fix some of the smaller things, or during turnover, as you mentioned, they may go and touch up the paint or some of those things. Obviously, they're not going to install their own carpet or floors. Most of them are going to go outside service. That most of them don't use property managers though. So when you tend to think of your numbers at the end of the year and you haven't paid a property manager 10% or some percentage of the rent, or you haven't paid a full month's rent or half month's rent to find the tenant, that frees up cash for those kinds of maintenance and upkeep of the building. Great.
Now, do you also have the financials in your package as well?
We give one side of the financials currently, okay, which is the revenue side. So our landlords will collect rent through the platform, and so we'll prepare all of the financials on the revenue side, and they can download that to a CSV and then import that into TurboTax or give it to their accountant directly. Once we've solved the maintenance side, I think we'll quickly add the expense side of the equation to accounting.
Yeah, I mean, if you solve that, I tell you, that'll be a great add-on for sure. I mean, it sounds like you've got a great product already, but I mean that's sort of that other side of the coin that, at least as a landlord myself, is that can be an area of great frustration if you don't have good people that you can call on and to be able to do what you need and do it quickly.
Yeah, one of the things, just as a business owner, one of the things that we try to figure out is how to have the best user experience. So the reason we haven't gone down the expense feature side yet is because we don't believe landlords are going to want to manually enter in expense items into our platform versus just keeping it in Excel or putting it into Mint. So we're trying to figure out what the right value prop is to have someone come in and put their expense items into our system. One of the things we're looking at is, can we automatically import all that data through some sort of integration with a banking partner who can just push it in? And we've looked at companies like Plaid who can give us transaction data and we import that in. I think that's something similar to what Mint does, where you can give access to a credit card and have all that. So we're trying to figure that out, but we just don't think anyone's going to want to manually enter in data.
Good point. When did your company first start? When did you first launch?
Yeah, there's 2 dates, I think, for us. So the first one is when we kind of left our jobs to start building the platform. That was middle of 2012. And that's when Ryan and I said, hey, we need to teach ourselves Ruby on Rails. And we spent, I'd call it 6 months really learning how to code, and then probably another 2 years building the product ourselves. And so our official launch, when we got our first real customers paying us, was middle of 2015.
And how did you market your company? I mean, that'd be interesting to see how do you get the word out about this great service?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really hard starting a business. And then at the time, we're first-time entrepreneurs. We made so many mistakes along the way. I think when we started building the product, we really should have been focused on building an audience at the same time. In startup world, there's a term called MVP, stands for minimal viable product, which is essentially you want to try to get the smallest workable product out as quickly as you can so you can see if people like it. There's a term that I think is always missed, the flip side of MVP, which is MVA, and stands for minimal viable audience. And we didn't know about that back then. So from 2012 to 2015, while we were building the product, we were doing nothing to build an audience. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake we made as a startup. Really should have been building that audience. But then in 2015, when we launched it and we were like, okay, how are we going to get customers? That's when we then shifted all of our focus away from the product and started thinking about that in a good way. And we realized a lot of the education that we were trying to share was probably the best avenue for it. So we wrote, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of educational pieces of content that were 2,000, 3,000 words each. We spent weeks on each one, just high quality educational content, and we started putting that out. And that really helped us build out our initial audience. It helped us start getting some SEO and organic traffic from Google. Once we had that flowing, we then we stepped it up and we started doing paid search via Google. Some real estate investors also use paid search, maybe to try to get leads for their property. I don't know that that's always successful, but for a small business, paid search is a great way to begin exploring paid media. And so we did that, and we found that to be really effective. Landlords who had problems go on the internet, they search for those solutions. That's what I had done. And so if you've got an issue where you don't know how to find a tenant, you may go to Google and say, where do I find tenants? And you'll either find us through our content, or you'll find us because of a paid ad we're doing on that search term.
Got it. As an investor, I mean, our audience are folks that are, 50 years of age and older. Some are approaching retirement, some are already in retirement, and they're looking at real estate investing as a means to be able to supplement their retirement years. Some kind of faced with this reality of, wow, when people are living longer, there's all kinds of sort of new things that are emerging, like assisted living insurance and other aspects of those latter years, medical expenses and things that they might not have factored into their retirement planning. What would you say as again, I know you're quite a bit younger than our focused audience here, but how do you see real estate investing as something that's going to benefit you in your retirement years?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think you're never too young or too old to begin investing in real estate. The sooner you do it, I think the better. It's just part of your overall investing portfolio, and you want to have some of that in that. I think it does become extraordinarily more important as you do get older and you can't afford to take as many of the risks that are inherent in the stock market from fluctuations that occur. Real estate is backed by a physical asset. It's especially rental properties, and has a steady ongoing cash flow. Now, I know we're going through a troublesome time right now, so that cash flow may not be as steady as it normally is, but it's generally very steady. Rental income doesn't really fluctuate all that much, especially if you've properly screened your tenants. So if you're looking to go into your retirement years and you're looking to decrease your risk, I think real estate investing is the right path to go, and to help produce for yourself a steady fixed income, if you will, that isn't tied to the government or something like that, and does grow with inflation. I think everybody, especially as they get older, should be looking into investment properties.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree there. That's why I'm here. So that's great for your business. And it sounds like you're getting. Could you share with us sort of how many current clients you have, and where kind of where you want to see it go?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently have just over 200,000 landlords who are using us, and 400,000 tenants. So even if you just do the math there, we have really small kind of beginner landlords, folks with 1 or 2 units. Most of them will tend to have just a single family home. They moved out, they're renting it. A few will have a condo unit. And then we call them larger landlords. The larger landlords may have like 6 units, like myself. So really small landlords, and they're really targeted towards like the do-it-yourself landlord, a landlord who's otherwise might be losing money on the property if they use a property manager. And so they've set out for themselves like, look, I want to maximize these returns. I want to make a real go at it. I'm going to do this myself. And that does tend to favor the smaller landlord.
Just a curious thing too is, you must have people in every kind of market. Some landlords, though, have to deal with folks, for example, that don't have a bank account, maybe, and they're have to turn in money orders or pay in cash or what have you. Do you ever encounter that? And is there a way that your system can work in that way?
Yeah, it's actually a lot rarer than we come across. Most people do have a bank account or a credit card, so we allow payments through either of those. And then I think just to address your first question there, yeah, we're in all 50 states, 18,000 plus zip codes, I think. So we're pretty much everywhere. Now, when a tenant does want to pay via cash or check or money order and give it to the landlord directly, that does happen. We expect that will happen. And sometimes that particularly happens when it's the first rent payment and the landlord's wanting the money in a tangible way. In that case, the landlord would log in and they can mark that the rent has been paid by who, what date, and so they can track everything.
What happens if you've got people that have Section 8 or other types of agency payments coming in? Do you set that up with them or work with them on that?
Yeah, we do. So our system is pretty flexible. It allows the landlord to customize in any which way he or she wants to. And so as far as Section 8, some of that income is coming directly from a HUD or another agency that's an intermediary, and that money usually gets direct deposited to the landlord's account. And in that case, the landlord can just go into the system and mark that the rent's been paid, or even when they're setting it up, they can just only set up the amount of rent that's due by the tenant themselves. So it's an extremely flexible system.
Do you ever work with them on the requirements and that kind of thing, or they're on their own pretty much in terms of establishing that relationship?
Yeah, no, for now, they're pretty much on their own. I know there are a lot of requirements to go through, and you have to get some site inspections and all those things. And so we do have some educational content, but we don't have any actual handholding on that just yet.
And as you talk about the educational content, give us an idea. Now, this is all on your website, right? At avail.com?
Yeah, it's a .co, avail.co.
Okay, got it. And what are some of the more popular articles that people are reading? Just to give us an idea of some of the content you might have. Is this all free? They can access this educational content for free?
Yeah, all the content's free. And in fact, our website itself is also free. So anybody can use any of the features for free. The content, I'd say, our two most popular pieces. There's one 5-part series on tenant screening that I think is still today our most popular, which really kind of walks you through how to screen a tenant, how to do rental history checks, what questions to ask of that prior landlord, what questions to put on your rental application, what should you do when you're doing a showing that helps you screen the tenants. All those things around tenant screening is a really popular one. We have another one around whether landlords should have an LLC or not.
That's great.
Or like we weigh the difference between should you have an LLC or instead should you have an umbrella policy, and then try to make the pros and cons of that situation. So that's another really popular one for our content.
What about evictions? Do you get involved there or provide any way to help tenants when they have to go through the eviction process?
Yeah, evictions are super city specific, so we avoid that for now. We used to try to pair a landlord with a lawyer, but we've suspended that for the time being. What we do in our system is if there is a pending eviction, there's a bunch of things that you need to do around don't stop receiving rent, don't take partial payments, have your lease ready to go for those things. And so we do help in those ways. And so if you are expecting eviction, you would simply go in and say, I don't want to allow partial payments, or I don't want to allow any payments until this is all cleared up. And so there are ways in the system to at least help you with the process, but not guide you through it.
Do you have a sort of a referral network? I would think a lot of people would want to align themselves with you, that provide services to real estate investors. Do you have folks like that you can refer out, whether it's, real estate, I mean, you mentioned attorneys, but it could be, CPAs, it could be other people that can help landlords and so forth.
Yeah, we have a bunch of nationwide partners that we work with for various things that our software doesn't do. So we tend to focus on the operational stuff of being a landlord, but we were never going to start packing up boxes for tenants and helping them move across the country and stuff like that. So in those cases, we did go out and do our own diligence and try to find the best companies for people to work with. So we have a bunch of those. I know your podcast is geared towards not selling, so I don't necessarily want to go and start selling all of them, but we did partner for moving companies and renters insurance and those kinds of things, and we find those to be extremely effective. One of the things that we're really trying to do is protect our tenants and landlords, and so if they have to go out and do their own research and partner with some third party that's not as good, then we feel like we failed and haven't pointed them in the right direction. So we take that seriously. As far as other networks, we do recommend quite a few other things to our customers where if we can't help them.
Gotcha. Just again, looking at your company, what are sort of your priority items that you want to hopefully include in your platform down the road or software?
Yeah. Well, we've got a roadmap that we're pretty excited about. That roadmap evolves, though, as we hear from customers. I think that's one thing. I mean, everyone preaches that, hey, listen to your customers and so forth. But, as a customer of other products, I almost never see them really listening. We try to do that in wholeheartedness. And so we've got a really great roadmap we're excited about, but it's always evolving because as we learn more and hear from our customers, it changes. We did talk about on this show already some of the things we're super excited about around maintenance and expense tracking. Those are things we're looking forward to. On the payments side right now, the United States is kind of different than most other countries with how we process payments here. We go through the Federal Reserve if you're doing bank-to-bank payments, and that tends to have a really long delay in processing payments because you have to wait for the funds to clear. They have to go through the Federal Reserve, and it can take 3 to 5 business days. And that's true for our customers now because of that. We have to hold funds for 3 days while we wait for payments to clear. So one of the things we're super excited about is improving and rolling out this idea of a fast payment network where we can move rent same day or next day and avoid kind of going through the Federal Reserve in a way. No one else is doing that or has the capability to do that. And we're experimenting with a whole bunch of things there that we're super excited about. So those kind of, I think, are the 3 big things that we're excited about.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. Well, time is kind of zipping by here, and I want to make sure we covered anything. Was there anything that you feel would be valuable that you might want to add to what we've talked about so far that our audience base might be interested in?
Well, I think we talked a lot about Avail, probably more than we should have. I do think for your audience, if they're not yet a real estate investor, it's definitely something that they should look into. It doesn't require as much money or cash as I think people think it does. It doesn't really require as much effort as people think it does either. And once you get started, as far as everyone I've talked to, you look back on it and we always wish that we had done it sooner. So if it's something that your audience is on the fence about, highly recommend that they start taking action and doing what they can to investigate properties, look at properties, and that's a good start. Even if they don't pull the trigger on buying one, at least go out and see them, get familiar with them.
That's great. Great. Well, we are approaching what we call our Wrap It Up session, and this is where I ask you a series of quick questions on resources that you use that have been invaluable to you. The idea is to share new things that maybe our listeners haven't heard before. So if you are ready, we can go ahead and wrap it up.
Sure.
All right. First question, favorite real estate book?
All right. Well, God, I hate saying this because it's going to be so cliche now, but probably 20 years ago, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
20 years ago, what were you, like 5? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
I think at late high school, maybe senior year high school.
Right.
And I think, that book doesn't give you anything tactical or useful in it, but it helps you frame the mindset of, being a real estate investor, being a business owner. It helps you understand that there's kind of this rat race out there that we're all going to go through, and you have choice and freedoms in choice. You can, if you want to go down that path, you can, but he provides 3 alternative paths where you can become a passive investor, an active investor, real estate investor, all these things. And it just opens up what that world could look like for you. So that would be the book I'd recommend if you are first getting started in real estate or even entrepreneurship.
I second that. That was the book that really motivated me and got me thinking differently about assets and what they are, and how we've kind of got those misconceptions of what an asset really is. So great recommendation. How about favorite just general business book?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think I've got 2, but you could probably call it 3. So the first one for me is really anything by Malcolm Gladwell. I really liked Outliers. Outliers is a great book. It really tries to break down how things break out of the norm and what kind of super people there are that can help you do that. A great book. And then I'd say the ones that's probably 2 for 1 are the Freakonomics books. So the first one and then Super Freakonomics. Those were great in really just expanding your mindset and thinking like what is visible to you isn't necessarily the real truth. And those books were really great at just being eye-openers.
Great recommendations. How about the most valuable website for success that you use, of course, other than your own?
Sure. Well, for starting a business, honestly, Google was huge. Just going out there and searching for stuff and educating yourself. I think now one of the big things when you hire someone is you tend to think, is this someone who knows how to Google? But for for the real estate business, I think one of the big things for me, it was using G Suite to help with the business. So that's another Google product, I suppose. But that gave me my voice over internet phone number so that my tenants don't have to have my real cell phone number. Gave me the ability to have my own email address so that I wasn't sharing my personal email, and gave me a way to kind of make it feel like a real business and treat it as a real business. That's great.
I like that. How about favorite app that you might use?
I used to use Quora, which is, I guess you could call it a social media app, but it's more of like a question answer. You would have someone ask a question and then legitimate people would go and answer it. And I've recently stopped using it because I feel like the people answering them aren't legitimate anymore. But that was a great app. So if your audience wants to check it out, there's something there. And then I've switched now. I tend to think like, what apps can I use to help me understand more about my rental property? So one that I recently started using was August, which is it's an app for the smart locks.
Oh, wow.
Last year I had 2 tenants lock themselves out, and I had to, I'm not the kind of landlord where I say, no, I can't help you, go call a locksmith for $150. So I left work to go let them in. And that
Ouch.
After that, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to, whenever tenants turn over and move out, I've been installing the August smart locks so that I can get a sense for, if I need to let them in, it's easy to do it. But also when tenants move in and out, it's easier to change kind of who has access, who doesn't have access. And it's made it a lot easier. Now I've also started thinking about installing Nest thermostats. I had last year a tenant leave for the winter and then tell me they forgot to turn the heat on. And if I had the app, I would have just, turned it on, but instead had to go over there. So maybe the problem is I'm just too willing of a landlord to go to the property. But anyway, these apps really help, I think.
And the first one you mentioned, August, it's a push button entry, so they don't use a key to get into the property?
Yeah, they can use the key. It's kind of it's a versatile one. So it's one where the contraption itself goes on the inside of the door. And when your phone approaches the door, the contraption kind of turns the handle on the inside so it unlocks. And then on the outside, it looks like any other lock where there's a key, so you can't tell that it's a smart lock or not. So the app will either unlock the door, or if you choose, you can also still use the key.
Very cool. Very cool. I learned something new here. That's great. How about favorite quote?
Sure. There's one, I think it's Benjamin Franklin, but I could be wrong, where he had said, "Well done is better than well said." And I guess I've lived by that for a while. I tend to think back when we started our business and we had a great idea for Avail, and it was on a napkin and we were talking about it. It was very well conceived idea, but then when it came down to execution, that's really where things are made. And you could have the world's best idea, but if you don't buckle down, in our case, it was to teach ourselves to code and build it ourselves because we couldn't find anyone, then you're not going to really get where you need to. So for us, it really comes down to the execution is better than the plan. And I think Benjamin Franklin's quote is better. Well done is better than well said.
Very good. Love that. Okay, here's a true entrepreneur question. Okay, let's say you lost everything. Okay, just boom, all your clients are gone. Boom, you're back to square one. But knowing what you know, and let's say you have $1,000 in cash, what would you do with that $1,000 to relaunch your business?
Boy, so if I've lost everything, I don't know if $1,000 of Kleenex is gonna.
just crying. Yeah, that's funny.
Well, $1,000 for real estate's not that much. In fact, you probably don't even need the 1,000 if it's down to the 1,000. I'd say if you lost everything and you had to restart over, I would either put the 1,000 in an account and just let it sit. And then focus my energy on things I can do physically. So in that case, if I'm trying to rebuild something, I would try to find a way where I can leverage my time again a little bit and consult others who have some cash in how to do it, and maybe partner with them in a way. You'd want to try to find a way to leverage everything you've learned, because although you've lost your money and your assets, you haven't lost the education. And I think you'd want to push on that more than the $1,000 that you have.
Okay, great. Wow. Well, the time has it by fast here, and I appreciate your time. Some great information, and sounds like an awesome service. I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening that would love to either contact you, find out more about your service, kind of go from there. So what's sort of the best way for folks to find out about Avail, and if they want to reach you or somebody that you would refer them to?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, they can go straight to, if they want to find out more about Avail, they can go straight to our homepage, which is avail.co, avail.co. They can also reach me directly. I'm happy talking with customers. I do all the time. And they can reach me at Lawrence@avail.co, and then my name is spelled Laurence. So Lawrence@avail.co. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for being on, Lawrence. This has been a great show. A lot of good information.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. This was a pleasure.
But before we go, we do have a way we close out our shows. And I don't know if you read all the way down on your notes there, but all of our guests get to close us out with their best old hound dog howl. Okay. So,
I don't remember seeing that in the notes.
I know. I think most people see that and they just don't want to really, retain that information. So, but just give us your best howl. Could be any dog. Okay. Doesn't have to be a hound dog. Could be anything in the dog family, right?
Sure. Well, this is probably going to sound more like a wolf. I guess I struggled knowing the difference there in the howls. So let's go for it.
Oh, that's great, Lawrence. Yeah, that'll work. That'll work definitely.
Cool. Make sure that gets cut out. That'll be good.
No, that's a keeper. That's a keeper. You might even get into the entry of our Golden Howl Awards, our once a year event. So you never know. Well, Lawrence, loved having you on. This is great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Well, thanks a lot.
I also want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we really appreciate it. Please note everything that Lawrence talked about today, as well as his great product out there, just some good landlord tips I think that we can all use. All can be accessed in our detailed show notes on the Old Dogs website at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And you're just going to look for that episode with Lawrence Jankolo. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.